Welcome to Bonepile Miniatures. You are looking at my Daemons of Chaos army as it sits at 1,000 points. I recently reached this 1,000 point threshold and would like to pause building this army and take a break and show you the progress I've made on this army. And this is for the Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition tabletop battle game. So I am in the process of building 6 different armies for this battle game, and I have reached the 1,000 point threshold for all of them. And this is the last of the 6 armies to reach this point. And I have already produced spotlight videos on my other 5 armies, and they can be found on this channel. They are Bretonnia, the Tomb Kings, Dwarves, Dark Elves, Wood Elves, and now the Daemons. And so what I'd like to do in this video is explain what I've done with this army so far and why. So the first question that I think most people would like to know about this army is, am I planning on building a Khorne-focused Daemons army only? Those familiar with the Daemons army know that there are 4 main factions to the Daemons army, based upon 4 different Chaos gods: Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. All the models shown in my army here are derived from the Khorne faction. And so am I only focusing on Khorne for this army? So the answer is both yes and no. Over the long term, this is not a Khorne army only. I do want to build all the units for each of the Chaos gods, but for the short term, I am focusing right now just on Khorne. Now, how long am I going to focus on Khorne only? I don't really know the answer to that question at this time. I am planning on focusing on Khorne until I somehow feel it is time to move on. Not that I couldn't come back and work on Khorne again afterwards, but for now I am going to focus on Khorne for a little while and then move on to another god and focus on that one for a little while. But I can't really say that there's a particular points level that I'm shooting for, and I can't even say if I'm planning on making each faction of equal size. I just don't know right now. I am just going with the flow of the things I want to do, and someday I'm sure I will want to switch focus to another Chaos faction. But then you might ask, why did I start with Khorne as opposed to the other Chaos factions? And that's both a combination of them being the first Chaos faction on the list when you go through the army book, and also a factor that they are just a really cool looking army, I think. And they just seem like the most vile creatures in the entire game. And I wanted an army that every other army in the game can hate. They are enemies of all. And now with that out of the way, I also want to discuss another preliminary topic. The words Daemons versus Demons. 2 almost identical words. What do they mean, and what is the proper way to say the name, and do they mean the same thing? So initially, I just assumed that both words meant the same exact thing. I assumed that Demons was the American English version, and Daemons was the British English version of the word. But I assumed that they were pronounced the same way and meant the same thing. So I used the words interchangeably. But I recently learned that the 2 words actually have different meanings. The word demon means a creature that is opposed to God or is evil, and most of us are very familiar with that meaning. But daemon is a creature that works for a god, or typically could be good. And I didn't know that, and probably most people are not familiar with that word and meaning. Now, it could be argued that both words should be pronounced the same, but that almost wouldn't make sense to me because they mean different things. So why would they be pronounced the same if they mean something different? The etymology of both words is probably significant. So, at least in my mind, I want to say daemon for the daemon word and demon for the demon word. Now, in practice, I am most likely going to say it both ways inadvertently and interchangeably, but I'm going to try to say daemon as much as I can. But don't fault me if I sometimes say demon. I'm sure it's going to slip out that way here and there. And I think I even slipped up when I opened up this video. But I can also see how both versions of the word could be used interchangeably in concept. Because you could use the word daemon because these creatures work with the chaos gods, and so they fit that definition. But the word demon would work also because they are kind of evil creatures from the perspective of humans and other forces of order. And so they fit the definition of the demon word too. They pretty much fit both definitions in my opinion. So I think that is another reason why I could see how both words could be used interchangeably, and I don't think it's really a big deal to hear it or see it happen. But for the purposes of this channel and these videos that I'm producing, I'm going to try and say it the Daemons version as much as I can moving forward. So let's move on from that, and I'll give you an overview of the units in this army. You'll notice right away that I kept to the traditional Khorne colors of red and black. And then I use copper for the metallic color. It may be mistaken at times with gold, but it is actually copper. But gold and copper do look alike, and I certainly understand the mix-up I hear sometimes with gold. The army is led by a herald of Khorne, and he is on foot, and he is also the only character in the army so far. Then I have 2 identical units of 15 bloodletters, each with a full command. Then I have 2 identical units of 5 fleshhounds. And then there's a unit of 10 chaos furies. Now for some of my armies, I put together a type of army theme with colors and heraldry. I've even put together a backstory for them with a general's name and such. But for these daemons, I have not done anything like that. I haven't put together a backstory for this army or anything unique about them. They're just simply daemons. They are the servants of Khorne that fulfill a singular purpose. Each daemon's identity is a mystery, and most probably don't even have names. I don't really plan on developing a special story or anything like that for them. The only thing that may develop are some reputations and grudges connected with playing games on the battlefield. These are just straight up daemons. And because of that, my unit descriptions will be brief, unlike the lengthier descriptions in my other army videos. So let's zoom in and get started and look at each unit. So here's the Herald of Khorne. This is a Games Workshop Finecast model, and he carries a sword, which is a Hellblade, and is quite a towering creature, even for a daemon. And this was really a fun model to paint, with all the skulls and chains. And then with his menacing and powerful pose, he is a fitting leader of my small army. And in comparison to my other army leaders, this model is quite terrifying in size and ability. Of course, to emerge as a top daemon of Khorne, you would expect this one to be an above-average fighter, even among army captains. But I didn't do anything special with him. He's just a very straightforward model, but awesome. And that's all I have to say about him. And now let's move on to the bloodletters. And this was the first unit I made for this army. There's 15 models, and they have a full command. And they all carry the Hellblade, which is especially devastating in battle. These are the basic troops of Khorne, the core of the army, and they are bloodthirsty infantry. As you can see, I painted all their fangs and claws copper, and then the rest of them is all kinds of combinations of red and black. There's no cookie-cutter paint pattern to these. They are identical in form, but are distinguished by different marks, spots, stripes, and blemishes. I pretty much consider their skin to be their only identifying fingerprint between individual daemons. But I imagine their skin to be much like chameleons. They are able to change skin colors and patterns as their mood and temperament and environment changes. So a daemon may look different between different stages of battle. But the meaning to their skin patterns is not specified and remains largely a mystery. Most who see a daemon don't live long enough to decipher any clues or patterns. It's up to our own imagination what it all means. So with this unit, I've tried my best to make each model look slightly different. And the more models you paint, the harder that is to do, but I haven't run out of ideas yet, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And now looking at the banner, I just used freehand to paint this monstrous face. And to help it stand out against the black background, I first painted it in white and then in red. And then the rest of the banner resembles fire or flame. And that was easy, and I liked the way it turned out. Now on some of the models I used a reddish brown to depict various shades of red. And I liked how that turned out too. And then I liked how this standard bearer turned out. I gave him an extra set of horns, so he has 4. And that makes him look extra exotic, like a beetle. And the rest of his face is all red and makes him really stand out. I also dry brushed all the swords the copper color, and I kept them simple. Sometimes I added a little bit of blood and gore to them, but not too often that it loses the effect. And I typically think that the models with the extra large or thick horns as the champions, and so that's what I'm going with. But that's all there is to this unit. And now here's the second unit of bloodletters, pretty much identical to the first unit. I did change up the banner image. I painted that one freehand too. I don't really have any plans of standardization to these emblems on these banners. Anything frightening and Khorne-like can be used. I'm expecting each one to be a little different. There's definitely no organization and mass production in Khorne's Dimensions of Chaos. So you may ask, why am I using units of 15 models? Most of my other armies use the standard unit sizes of 20. So first of all, the unit costs are higher for these models compared to most other infantry. And all their swords and claws and horns everywhere make them actually a little hard to form together. So 15 is about all I can do without too much trouble. I'm not sure it would be very fun to fit 5 more models together like this. 15 is enough for me. Now I am using the 20mm bases for these models. And in retrospect, I should have used the 25mm bases. And future units of these guys will probably have the 25mm bases. But I'm not sure that the slightly larger bases will alleviate the situation, that these models are just hard to group together in any groups larger than what I've got. If you look closely, you can see that on the tray I have them spaced out just a little bit, as if they were on 25mm bases. But it is still hard to put them together. And so I think 15 will be a standard unit size for these bloodletters in my army. And speaking of the bases, I'll point out that I have a very simple design for them. Instead of using gravel and flock like I do with some of my other armies, I've just been painting these bases for this army. The design is supposed to be a little abstract. It's just a mix of flowing copper and little flecks of embers and such. Not really meant to represent anything specific, but I do think the design complements the army well. The absence of definitive ground materials like rocks and plants adds to their enigmatic and nightmarish appearance. And so, like my other unit, each model is meant to look very similar to each other with some subtle differences in skin color and patterns. And that's a theme you'll find throughout my army. There's an absence of identity in the realms of chaos. But here's another blood-soaked sword licker. And that's all I have to say about these units. Other than I plan to make many, many more, and I plan on making them the bulk of my army. And now let's move on to the flesh hounds. I have 10 flesh hounds altogether. And it doesn't really matter if I consider them 1 unit of 10 or 2 different units of 5. I planned these hounds in a way that I could go either way with them. I can just slide these 2 trays together and 2 units become 1. They are war beasts that don't really have any unique command models, so they can be split up or combined any way I want to. And these are plastic models from Games Workshop, and I really enjoyed putting this unit together and painting them. And I continued with the dark black and red theme, and I tried to make the color variations a little different with each of them, just like I did with my bloodletters. I did do a few small modifications to mix things up. There's this really big hound where I attached a ball and chain to his collar, and that makes him look extra threatening. Would he sometimes whack himself with that spike ball? I'm sure it would happen. But this is a Daemon of Corn. No love lost. It doesn't really matter to them if they hurt themselves in their process of destruction. Then I put this skull on one of the spiked tails of another hound, and I thought using the same colors for it looked really great. There's another one where I used a sword that he seems to be stepping on at the right angle. And for this one, I tried to make it look like he had a piece of intestine hanging from his mouth from some poor unfortunate victim. I just used a small piece of mason's cordage for that. I soaked it in some super glue and bent it to the shape I wanted it. This one has a hand of a zombie sticking out of his mouth. I actually don't really remember where I got that hand from, but the zombie hand goes to show that they have no standards on what they munch on. They'll eat anything. And I like this one quite a bit with the tiger stripes on the back. Overall, I really like the appearance of these models. I think they look like kind of a mix between dogs and dragons. And this one may be like a Komodo dragon. I also like this one with the tally marks on its tail. It's anyone's imagination what they represent. Maybe missions or kills or something else. And so that's all I have to say about this unit. And we'll move on to the next one. So here's the Chaos Furies. These are metal models from Games Workshop, and there's 10 of them. And they also don't have any command models per se. They pretty much all look identical. There's only minor differences in the poses. And I like the concept with these models. They look like what you would see in the book. They seem like a mix between a dragon and a rat. So I think they are good depictions of a Chaos Fury. I just wish there was a little more variety in the poses. And that would be my only wish with them. Now the army book makes it seem like these creatures can work with any of the gods of chaos. But I made these ones look very specific to the corn god. So I used all the same paint colors and gave them the same appearance as all the other daemons in the army. They have all their copper fangs and claws like all the others, and mixes of black and red all over their bodies. And as I've mentioned in my other videos, I make all my own magnetic movement trays from scratch. I have an article in my Bonepile Miniatures blog where I explain how I do that. And this unit has the skirmishers rule. So I went ahead and made a tray large enough for them to fit in the skirmishers formation with the 2 ranks of 5. And I do like presenting them on the battlefield in their proper formation. Then when they engage in close combat, they can just bunch up together. They also all have the fly rule, which is a unique thing among all my armies. I only have one other unit in my Dark Elves army that can do that so far. So they are a fun little addition to the Khorne army, and that's all I'll have to say about them. And that's it with this army. There's not that much to say about them, and I like that about them. I expected this video to be much shorter than my other army videos. There's really no drama or story to them, no individuality, no legacy to defend, just Daemons of Chaos. They exist for one purpose, and they do what they are ordered to do. And they are an army that every other army can hate. They are enemies of all. And now, for those of you who are following my channel, I have now done a couple of showcase videos for each of my 6 armies that I am building. A discussion video and a music slideshow video. And if you have not seen my other army videos, I recommend you go to my channel and check those out. My next goal is to get all of these armies up to 1,500 points. And at that point, I will release more content about what I've done to grow these armies. So there will be a long pause in additional showcase videos, which is a bit of sad news, but I do have some good news. So while I am working on all the new additions to these armies, I will also be releasing some new content on this channel featuring some battle reports. I will be putting all 6 of my armies into a small tournament. I have different players committed to play each of the armies, and we'll see how they fare against each other. So it will be a little 1,000 point tournament, and it will be an interesting one because all of my armies are more collector's armies, not really optimized for winning games. They're all mostly core, but being all in the same boat, it will be interesting to see how they match up in battle. And I will explain the details of this tournament in my next video, and then we'll see how it all turns out. In the meantime, I will be growing my armies in the background to the 1,500 points level, and if you want to track my progress on this goal, you can follow my blog at bonepileminiatures.com and get all the updates of my new army units as I build them. And I am also planning on starting a 7th army, which I will keep a secret as to what that is for the time being. But if you follow my blog, you will be among the first to know. So I will see you soon on my next video, where I will explain the details of the tournament. Thanks for watching. I'll see you the next one.